Welcome back to another episode, Student of the Game. And today I'm with my guy, Coach Kenton Aubrey. How you doing, brother?
Man, I'm great. Great. I appreciate you having me on here. I'm in the presence of greatness. Greatness in the real estate community, the golf course, the basketball court. Man, this guy does it all.
Aging like a fine wine, I guess. But man, this is actually the first time I've worn my own swag on the podcast. Relationships win, baby. Relationships win, and that's what this is all about. It's about how do we connect the dots between what other people do and where are the lessons at. Where are the lessons at where, we can coach people up. If you're listening right now, if you're driving in the car or walking your dog or working out, we want to coach you up right now. This is going to be a coaching session from somebody, a man that's got some talent. He's been in the coaching circles for a long time, but more importantly, this is March Madness. You're listening to this. It's being recorded at March Madness, and the theme of today is survive and advance. We want to know, what does it take to survive and advance? You're going to be watching basketball, and there's underdog teams, and they're going to pull through and hit some buzzer beaters, and there's going to be teams that are favored to win and they're not going to win and their season's over. What have you experienced in your life that you felt like, I am just surviving, I just need to advance, I'm surviving and advancing? So we're going to talk March Madness. So Coach Kenton Aubrey, man, give us a rundown. What's March Madness mean to you?
Well, being in the industry, this is the greatest time of the year. You talk in coaching, there's multiple seasons within a season, right? There's your preseason where you're just getting your guys ready. There's the regular season where you're competing. There's the postseason where you're in, conference tournament play, or ultimately what everyone's goal is to play in the national tournament. Be a part of March Madness, and so it's the greatest time of the year in sports, in my opinion, and it really embodies what people do in terms of their entire breadth of work, right? Coming to a culmination. Like, this is what it's all about. This is what you worked for. This is what you trained for. This is what the heartache taught you. This is what the success taught you. And it can all be over, just like that, with the bounce of the ball, just one way at the end of the shot clock, or buzzer beaters. Like, that's what it's about. And it's surviving and advancing. Everybody talks about the underdogs, right? The 15 seeds beating the 2 seeds. And here recently we've had some 16 seeds upsetting the 1 seed, the true David and Goliath. But I think a lot of times what can get lost is how close some of those upsets are to occurring. The favorites, right? There's always been somebody that's had a close game, and it could have been an upset. It could have been a 16 seed beating a 1, or a 12 beating a 5, 8, 9, whatever the case may be. And sometimes the luster of that gets swept under the rug because everybody loves the underdog. But there's also so much value in some of those favorites, per se, having to go through a really taxing game, and that could be the difference in them ultimately winning a national championship, because they were tested early, and that was how they learned, like, hey, we played with fire and we almost got burned. We can't do that again. So let's refocus, let's lock back in, and let's survive. We survived that one, we advanced, but let's not put ourselves in that position again.
Absolutely, and you're right. It's a great time of year because after March Madness, we're hitting the Masters, and even in golf, you got to survive in advance. You got to make it to the next round. You got to make it to the weekend. Let's coach some people up a little bit. So, tell us about your background. So, I got somebody on the pod today. I'm gonna let you tell your story, but I got somebody on the pod today that Professor Aubrey. Is it, you calling you Professor Aubrey, Coach
Coach, I
Aubrey?
go by Coach. I see Professor Aubrey in an email, and I'm like, I sign it Coach Aubrey. Like, you don't
Coach.
have to call me Professor. I'm still Coach.
So this guy's the associate head coach at Indiana Tech. You've been around the block when it comes to coaching college basketball at a high level. I want to get into that a little bit. That's going to be the majority of our conversation. But recently, you've been what do you say, professing? You call it
Professor,
teaching? Are you teaching?
teaching,
Teaching
coaching,
some
coaching.
coach. You're coaching some college students up in organizational leadership classes specific to sports. You help run an AAU circuit. Man of many talents. So let's get into who is Kenton Aubrey. Where are you from, man?
Well, I grew up, born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Um, until college life, I really didn't venture very far north. Indiana was a totally different land. There's a bridge. The Ohio River separates Indiana and Kentucky, and sometimes it can seem like you're going into a different world when you cross that bridge and go over into Indiana. So started in Kentucky, and it's been a journey. But the beautiful thing about a journey is it's just that, right? Like there's a lot of chapters that I feel like I still have to write in this book. It's been filled with the crazy roads have led me to roadblocks, led me to dead ends. There's been some speed traps along the way, but there's also been some fast lanes and cruise control, and fortunately a lot of victory laps as well. I think back on my journey, and I think everybody's journey is always filled with some obstacles and some triumphs, but everybody's got some gratefulness in their journey as well. And I'm very grateful for my family and my friends, along the way that have supported me. Mom and dad instilled a lot of hard work in me as a young kid. They showed up every single day. They went to work sunrise. They didn't get home until sunset most of the time. They worked labor intensive jobs, and were able to provide for us for what we needed. So I think a lot of my journey and wearing a lot of the different hats is kind of traced back to the work ethic that they instilled in me. And really, the reason I think that March Madness is so special to me, and my grandmother is no longer with us, but I'll never forget that she was a huge University of Louisville basketball fan. She loved Denny Crum. She loved Rick Pitino when he took over there. But probably the most lasting memory I have, and where I can trace my entire journey back, is to her. And some parents, you might want to close your ears on this, but the reason I love March Madness is because my grandmother literally let me skip school to stay at home and watch March Madness. Like those noon tip off games, and it's like one tips off, and then before you know it, boom, 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 you got 4 games going. Well, I got to the age where we loved it. We filled out brackets for like dollars, but it got to the point where, like, the night before the tournament, we'd go to the grocery store, we'd buy all the snacks, all the meals that we wanted, and it was almost like a snowstorm was coming. Like, we're gonna huddle up in here, and we're gonna have everything we need, so we don't have to leave this house, so we can watch as much basketball as we can. So being in higher education, that's probably not the greatest role model story to tell, but it's very important to me, and I'm very thankful for that, because we made a lot of memories doing that. But ultimately, it left a long lasting impression of basketball and my love for it. And I played up until college, played for a little bit, and then started to kind of venture into the coaching world while I was still playing, and then ultimately figured out that's what I wanted to do.
Well, and I think that's, if my memory serves me, that's where we really connected. I think we maybe have met before then, but we really connected, I think, on the trip to UCLA. And PFW played UCLA, the Bruins, several years back, and our family went on that trip, and it was cool to see. We went on the bus, we went on the plane with you guys, we traveled, went to the same hotel, and it was the first time my kids and my wife, especially Lindsay's, like, wow. Now I know why you never called me back when you played, is because you didn't have any time. These guys, this is like a full-time job, and you were running the show back then, and so we connected, and we've built a relationship over time. But you said the word grateful, and you talked about your grandmother, and I think no matter what you're going through, right? Like, this is Survive in Advance for you personally. It's Survive in Advance for all of us listening. Whatever you're going through, you said the word grateful, and I think that's really where it kind of starts. Is how many people love sports and would love to do what you do? You talk about sports, you are sports, like, all day long, 24/7. This is what you get to do for a career. And there's so many connections to business. And you even said it. It's like the David and the Goliath. Like, if I have an appointment, and it's like, I've never closed this deal before. I've never, sold this many t-shirts, or I've never, sold this many homes, or whatever business you're in, right? This is the opportunity where everybody's on stage and gets to show, okay, have you put in the work? You know, did what you is what you did in the off season going to show up right now? Let's dive into some of the fundamentals. So let's talk about coaching, really, because I think a lot of people need coach, and people need to hear all the time, how can they improve? What do they need to work on? One of our core values is grow constantly. And I say this a lot. It's one of the most challenging core values that we have as adults, right? As a kid who signed up to play sports, it's different. But as an adult, if you're being asked to grow constantly, sometimes people hear, I'm not good enough, or the effort that I just gave, you want me to grow some more. And so I want to talk to you. What are the fundamentals in coaching? How do you find and see the best in a kid and bring that out of them?
Well, you could talk specifically to coaching about what the fundamentals is, but whether you're in real estate, you're in coaching, you're in the t-shirt business, whatever you're doing, ultimately the number one fundamental, I mean, let's plug the merch a little bit. Let's talk relationships, right? I mean, that's what it is. I worked for Coach Kaufman at Purdue Fort Wayne, and something he constantly stressed and it ingrained, in my philosophy and my core values is building equity, right? Real estate equity,
Love
let's
it.
talk about it. That's what it is. But
Music to my
when you
ears.
when you build equity with someone in a relationship, it prepares you for those tough moments. When you see the, like you mentioned, the bad or the good in someone, you can work through that, especially in a pressure packed moment like a basketball game, whether it's the end of, the half, the end of the shot clock, the end of the game, like we need a bucket to win this game. That's where the equity that you built really comes into play. And, what that means is if I spend time with someone outside of the court, obviously I spend a ton of time with our players on the floor, individual workouts in the weight room and practice, game planning and film. But if that's all that my relationship consists of with those players, then when things get really tough, somebody's having a bad game, somebody's going through something, it might be a little tougher for them to see what my intentions are when I'm trying to motivate somebody. Now, if I take the time to get to know them, get to know their family, get to know their interest, talk through some tough times through them, with them when they're going through something, then, when those moments arise and those pressure packed moments, you know, they know deep down, like, coach has got me, like coach loves me, coach took me here when my car broke down, or when I was going through a personal matter, coach took the time to sit and talk through it with me. So if I maybe have to coach them a little tougher, I may have to get on them a little bit and use some of those motivational tactics. It helps to alleviate, maybe them misinterpreting what my message is, within that. So I think that's the biggest fundamental that ties everything together. Is having those relationships in place, and that might not always just be a player, right? It might be the relationship I have with my head coach, or the relationship a head coach has with his assistant coach, or a student manager, or an athletic director. Like, it can all be traced back to that, and the success, coming from that. But, for me, also, it goes hand in hand with life, whether it's teaching, whether it's parenting, whether it's coaching. I'm a planner. I'm a game planner. I love game planning for something. You ask me to be on a podcast, and let's get to work. Like, I'm gonna think about, like, what are we gonna talk about? I'm gonna listen to a podcast of yours previously, and get a feel for what the podcast is. Or if I'm, trying to get my son Luca to eat,
Mm.
because he won't eat anything, right? Like, I'm gonna sit and game plan before we get to the table. Like, all right, I'm gonna set his meal up this way so that hopefully this entices him to eat a little bit more. So I'm a planner. I love to sit down and figure out a game plan, because I love to be prepared, but I also love to see when a game plan works, right? Whether it's going against a 2-2-1 press, like, this is how we're going to break it, or, like I said, this is how I'm going to get my son to eat dinner tonight. Like, there is a rewarding, fulfilling aspect of when you sit down and put the time into something and you see the success that it happens. I think that just fuels you for your next one, and what you're doing. And a big part of doing that and having success comes down to organization. I love to sit down and organize a plan. When we're in UCLA, like you said, that day doesn't just happen on its own. It's not like, it's 12 o'clock, we should probably eat lunch. No, that's done days in advance. Like, I'm going to be organized down to the hour, down to the minute. Like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to eat lunch at this time. We're going to walk through at this time. We're getting on the bus at this time. I got Jimmy John's being delivered at this time. Like, that's part of being organized. And, I've heard, you speak about it before, and you and I have had conversation about preparation, right? If you want to have success, you got to be prepared, and that's where you when you run into some of those situations that maybe you weren't expecting, and a hiccup gets thrown into the plan. If you're prepared, if you're organized, if you've got a game plan, if you've got the relationships, then you can get through a tough situation, whether it's 10 seconds on the clock or 10 days until closing date, or whatever that may be. I think those all kind of tie together.
Absolutely. No, we've got our own Dobo on our team. David runs the show back here. Our director, and it was something that I remember from that UCLA trip. Now that you say, everything was planned, and let's go back to the fundamentals. Relationships and planning or preparation. It's, same thing. It's we got on that bus, and there's all these bottles of water, right? There's bottles of water, and my
Road
kids,
tough.
my kids are, yeah, right. My kids are like, man, these guys are thirsty. So what you just said was one example of, you don't have bottles of water on the bus in case somebody gets thirsty. You have bottles of water on the bus because what you guys know is when you travel, you get dried out. It's long, it's taxing on your body to travel. So we're going to road tough this thing. Road tough is, I'm going to open this bottle of water and I'm going to chug it, and I'm going to drink this bottle of water before we go get on the plane. And to this day, every time we go on a trip, we get ready to go on the plane, Lindsay's like, all right, kids, road tough. Let's go.
Road tough.
Road
I
tough.
love it. I love
Um,
it.
talk a little bit. You talked about, let's get into, what is the behind the scenes? What does falling in love with practice mean to you? I mean, you mentioned preparing and planning and walking alongside somebody and building equity. All great things. If you're a leader right now, I mean, take notes, please. Equity. We also talk about deposits and withdrawals. When are you making deposits in people's lives? There will be a time where you may have to make a withdrawal. Have you made enough deposits? Talk about, when you're in relationship with one of these student athletes and they're going through something, or even let's just say it's March, right? It's the end of the year. When things don't go well, how do you make those adjustments? When things aren't going as planned, one of the fundamentals. When the relationship you've been working on, with one of your coaches, one of your players, is not heading in the direction that you want it to go. How do you rebound there?
Well, it's ultimately comes back to being prepared, right? That's something that you have to plan for. You can't just walk into something and say, specific to a player. Well, I've built the equity. We've gotten in the gym. We've done some extra work. We've watched some film, and like it should just happen, right? Like it's like literally being handed a study guide. Here's the study guide. This is an open book test. You should ace this test, right? Like you've got everything you need to do it. Well, sometimes there's factors, external factors that come into play, and you have to be prepared for when that happens, and that's where you've got to have a backup plan. Having a plan A and a plan B isn't enough, because there's always going to be a factor that pops up. We use the water, right? Well, what if we drink all that water? Well, we need to have another case of water, right? Well, plan C is you see the case of water that's on the bus in the front seat. What you don't know is I got another 2 cases of water underneath the bus in case we run out of those, or in case we leave them somewhere, whatever the case may be, having, an alternate plan. But, specific to the player is just finding different ways, peeling back different layers when, you're not able to get what you need out of option A and option B. Well, all right, well, let's go to plan C.
Talk about March Madness. Okay, you talked about plan A, plan B, plan C. How do you start off strong in March? How do you get the players to believe that this is a new season? Whether you come into March on a winning streak, a losing streak, how do you start off strong in March?
Well, ultimately, if you look at a team's final record, sure, you're going to have a team that went 32-5. You're going to have a team that maybe, only lost one game the whole season. But you're also going to have some national champions that were, you know, 27-9, or, they had maybe double digit losses. Maybe you have, a crazy team like that. And I think that's what you hammer home, and it's synonymous for everything. Like nobody remembers that you guys lost a game in December if you win the last game in March. Like that's the power of March. Nobody remembers how many points you scored in a November non-conference game, you scored 30 points. That's great. Well, how did we finish the year? Nobody remembers that. So that's the power ultimately of March Madness, is like, this is your chance to right all those wrongs that maybe you had over the course of the season. This is your opportunity to prove, the doubters wrong. Like, that's the power of March Madness. And ultimately, everybody wants to be a part of success. Having a great win-loss record is fantastic. But I've been really fortunate through my time at Indiana Tech to get up on that ladder, and getting up on that ladder. No matter how the game went, whether you won by 20 or you won by 2, as a player, whether you played poorly, you didn't maybe perform to the level that you felt you should have performed. It all goes away when you make that climb up the ladder. You got a pair of scissors in your hand and you get to cut that piece of net, and you have that for the rest of your life. I have every piece of net. Some of those nets are a little beat up, and they got some character, I'll call them, on them.
Right.
Maybe they changed a little color because the ball was going through them, too many times. But those are things that nobody can take away from you. When you're a champion, nobody can take away, no matter, again, how well your season went up to that point or how poorly it went up to that point. Like, it's the ultimate culmination of, like, this is my report card. No matter how poorly you performed in the semester or on the week before your assignment, or in business, no matter how the previous business meeting didn't go, the previous deal didn't close, the next one that you're about to close is just as important. So if you're able to kind of become hyper focused on that and focus in the moment, and one at a time, and how important each of those wins are, like, that's why it's so important. And if you can get your employees, your coworkers, your team to obsess with that, like, this is a new season. It's Everybody says it, it's overplayed, right? We're 0-0. Duke played a game last night, and before the game, as successful as Duke's been, they tweeted out 0-0, right? Well, unfortunately, Duke is 0-1 in the postseason, but they got an opportunity to bounce back. But you get everybody to be hyper focused on that, and to recognize, like, this is a new, fresh, clean slate, and this is the opportunity for me to put everything that I've done over the course of this season into play, and everything I've learned.
So I want to I want to make sure the listeners heard what you said when you talked about how many different seasons you have, in one year. I think if you're in business right now, if you're in school, if you're retired, if you're looking at your year, and you don't break down your year, and you're thinking of, am I having a good year? Am I having a bad year? I think a year is too long. I think a year is too long of a time horizon to really invoke any sense of urgency. And I think where where performance and 0-0, I get it, right? We have 12 weeks that we use to measure our success. So every quarter is a new year for us. Every 12 weeks is a new year for us. Our goals are around 12 weeks. And for us, it's like you talked about, you have a preseason, you have a regular season, you have non-conference, you have, when conference starts, your first conference game, tweet it out, 0-0. you know, and then you get to March, and now it's this new season. Well, it's a big deal because the whole country's watching. You're playing against teams that are not in your conference, that you've never faced before. You got to figure out how to scout them. But in business, my encouragement to the listener is, if you can focus on 12 weeks at a time, what happens is, it's called periodization. It's actually a cycling term. But if you focus on short cycle execution, which is my timeline of getting something done, right? You remember when you're in school and the teacher's like, hey, this is due at the end of the month. You probably even do this as a teacher, as a professor. Hey, this is due at the end of the month. Cool. When do people turn it in? End of the month.
Of the month.
End of the month. Now, if you said to me, like, hey, this is due at the end of this week, I'm going to get it done by the end of this week. So whatever your time horizon is, that's called short cycle execution. And in business and in life, I like to set goals every 12 weeks. If you're retired, go set a goal. In the next 12 weeks, I want to take this vacation. I want to see the grandkids this many times. I want to go play pickleball, whatever retired people do. But at the end of the day, we believe on our team, every 12 weeks is a new year for us. And it allows us to kind of feel like we're having this new March Madness. March 31st is a deadline for us. We're having our own March Madness right now. We've got about 8 goals that we're working on. And I'm going to say that about 4 or 5 of them we're going to hit, and there's 3 or 4 that are kind of on the fence. And you know what we got to do? We got to put our best players in the game. We got to go all out because the clock's winding down, and we got to show up and compete. Dive in a little bit more to team dynamics and leadership. So, as a coach, how do you spot leaders on your team? Like, what does leadership mean to you when it comes to not abdicating it, but almost delegating leadership, where you're trying to raise people up? How do you do that?
Well, some of it is, it's self-instilled. The thing about leadership is, when I was at Western Kentucky, we had a very successful college and NBA coach come in and work on some things on the court with us. But what was really valuable, at least to me, was hearing him, kind of talk about things off the court and the unseen, hours per se that we like to talk about. And his quote that stuck with me throughout college and even to this point was, "Leaders are lonely," you know, and there's a lot of
Time out, time
things
out,
that
time out, time out. I want you to keep telling the story, but if you're listening right now and you're feeling lonely, it's probably because you're a leader. It's probably because you think different. It's probably because your actions don't align with the crowd. If you're lonely, like we're going to give you permission. It's okay to feel lonely. If you feel lonely right now, welcome to the club. Keep going, Ken. But people needed to hear, like, that's a normal side effect of being a leader. I love that. Keep going.
it is because it's not always the prettiest job. You look at Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, right? Arguably two of the most successful leaders in the basketball world, but you hear far more stories about, some interactions they had with teammates that maybe weren't, the greatest interaction. And it wasn't done out of malicious intent. It was, I know what makes that person tick, and I know what I got to do to get that out of them. So when you're trying to find leaders, in your program, it's not something that, here's a game plan. Here's how you become a leader. Now, sure, there are people, we've all seen it in business and in athletics. There are individuals that over the course of time evolve into leaders. But when you walk into, your preseason open gyms and you're looking at leaders and you're trying to identify who the leaders are within your program, you're looking at people that are doing the tough, uncomfortable things. When somebody isn't giving it their all, when they're not giving full effort in something, leaders are the people that are going to call that out. Leaders are the people that are okay with having a tough conversation, right? Now, that doesn't mean you're the guy that everybody hates, and you're the guy that's always, on somebody and maybe barking at them. Leaders are also the people that are able to find opportunities to put their arm on somebody, in that moment. Like, you might have just came down on your teammate really hard 2 plays before, but when he makes a good play, you're the first person to give him a pat on the back. You're the first person to pick somebody up when they sacrifice their body for, the greater good of the team. So I think those are things that are kind of organic when you're looking at a leader. People that are, obviously lead by example, like who showed up. I mean, it's such a, you can dive so deep into it, right? Like, let's go back to the open gym. All right, well, open gym starts at 2 p.m. Well, there were 5 or 6 guys that showed up at 1:50. All right, you're there 10 minutes before, right? You get stretched. Like, you know how it is. You got to stretch, you got to get loose, you got to get a couple shots in, get the feel of the ball. Well, what about the guy that was there at 1:30 that was shooting on the gun before? That's a leadership trait right there. That's something that I didn't coach him up to do that. I didn't text him and say, "Hey, you should come in early beforehand and get shots up." Like, I'm sitting in my office and I hear the ball bouncing at 1:30 and I look out, peek out of the blinds and see who's down there. Like, that's a leader because he's leading by example. Not only is he trying to incorporate, that amongst his teammates, he's also know, like, this is what I got to do to be prepared. And so those actions that occur before the game, before the meeting, like people that are prepared the night before, those are leadership traits that, you look for, as you're trying to figure out kind of who your leaders are. And I'm going to tell another story. I used to do these camps every summer. I used to go across, anywhere in the country basically that I could drive my little beat up car to, that I could get there and not worry about my car breaking down. But And this was when I was in Kentucky. I'm driving, 6, 7 hours to Michigan State every year to work Coach Izzo's camps. I wanted to be around greatness, and there was such a great networking opportunity at those camps that I loved doing it. But Mateen Cleaves was there. And Mateen Cleaves was, one of the most beloved, decorated Spartan in that program's, very storied history. And he told a story about, his freshman year, and I'll mix the years up, so forgive me for that. But basically, what he said was, my freshman year, I showed up and I went to the gym every day. Like, I was there. So when we didn't have success, and I looked at my coaches, I said, Coach, I'm in here working. Like, I don't know what to tell you, right? Well, the coaches told him, well, did you bring a teammate with you? Well, no, he was sleeping. Well, did you wake him up? No. So the next year it was, hey, I'm going to get a workout in, and and you are going with me. Right. And that becomes contagious. Like, before you know it, you've got 3 guys coming with one player, and then, 3 or 4 other guys see, well, man, they're getting in the gym. Well, I'm going to go get in the gym. Right. People that can unite people like that, at first it takes some, conversations, maybe some motivating tactics amongst players, like to get that guy in the gym. But it just becomes, again, leading by example. You get those guys in the gym with you, and then it starts to become contagious. Everybody wants to get in the gym. And then before you know it, in basketball, well, hey, we're going to go work out for an hour. We're going to go lift after that. Well, I mean, we already spent this much time together. Well, let's go grab some food and watch the game. And then you really start to get to the nitty gritty, the meat and the potatoes of what truly, building a team and being a leader is about, right? Like, you got those guys in the gym, you got them better in basketball. That's no doubt. But now you're starting to impact stuff off the court. And that comes with spending time together, right? That comes with eating meals together. And before you know it, you've built a relationship to where this player might call a teammate and say, hey, my car's broke down. Can you take me to class? Or, hey, can I ride to campus with you? Right? Those moments that those guys spend together off the court are way, I shouldn't say it this way, but I mean, they're way more valuable, right?
Mhm.
Because that's building equity. Like, in that car ride on the way to practice, they're not talking about, hey, this is the ball screen coverage we're gonna be in today. They're talking about what's going on in their life, with their family, with, their relationship, whatever the case may be. And if I know this guy knows this personal thing about me, then he knows why maybe I'm struggling in practice today. Or he knows where my heart is. He knows I'm a good dude. He knows that I'm willing to sacrifice and do whatever I need to do for the team.
And he's there to pick you up, right? And each other are there. And so you said two things that sound like, if you listen to just the talking points, they may contradict one another. Leadership is lonely, but then you're also saying, like, you got to take people with you. You don't have to stay lonely, right? I think that's the message. You don't have to stay lonely in leadership. Leadership is lonely. But the good part about it is, you've got to find your people. You got to find the people to mastermind with. I can go back and I can point to where our business really took off. And in 2017, we went to this leadership. It was a real estate leadership conference, and the conference was great. But what was better was the people that thought like us, that acted like us, that wanted some similar results. And so we build equity, And so now we have friends all around the country that sell real estate. And the ideas that we have and the things that we're putting into our business, it's because we were lonely. Who's doing what we think we should be doing? Nobody around here. Well, let's go find them. So if you're lonely right now, hey, that's normal, but don't stay there. I think that's the message right there. It's bring people with you. Go get in a mastermind group. Go. Iron sharpens iron. Go find an accountability partner. I love it. I could
Well,
talk sports all day long. What else you
well,
got?
one thing I wanna go back to is it is lonely, and it doesn't always stay lonely. But a part of leadership that, is constantly overlooked. Everybody thinks, like, the leaders, the alpha, the trendsetter. Well,
Hmm.
there is also a portion of leadership that is followership.
Hmm.
Sometimes it takes you. I might be the leader that sets the tone for us defensively. Well, I'm going to fall in line and become a follower for the person that might set the tone for us offensively. That might not be my game. That might not be my strength. That doesn't mean I'm not a leader, because I recognize a deficiency that I have, and I know, hey, this person excels at it. So I'm going to hitch my wagon to them on that side of it. But I'm going to handle what I can handle, and what I know I can bring to the table. So it's a push pull, right? Like, there's a little bit of everything. I mean, even the greatest leaders, have deficiencies. And part of being a successful leader is surrounding yourself with the people that can make you successful and make up for those deficiencies. But there's a huge part of that involves being humble, right? Like that's a slice of humble pie. And maybe I'm not great at um, organization. Maybe
Mhm.
I'm not great at offensive strategizing. Like I'm going to get somebody with me that's really good at it. And that is also a component of leadership that is overlooked. But when people see that, it's contagious as well. Well, Coach Aubrey knows that he's deficient in this, so he turns to so and so for this. Well, I can relate to that. I'm not so great at this, so I'm going to rely on so and so to bring me up in that area that maybe I'm not so great at.
Man, I love how you're talking because I think what it gets to is as leadership becomes active, now we're building culture. You talked about Mateen bringing his teammates with him. If you're listening right now and you've got employees, if you have team members, and you feel like, right, because it's a feeling, if you feel like you're the one putting in the work, bring someone with you. And when you start bringing people with you and your team starts rallying around, putting that effort in, now you're building culture. I heard a quote the other day. I'm gonna read it. It says, "Build a team so strong that they don't know who the leader is.
Mm,
Build a team that's so strong that they don't know who the leader is." And obviously, leaders usually stick out, but what that quote is telling me is culture, right? That's the next phase when you have active leadership and people are being led and people are willing to follow. Man, that's a powerful culture.
it's a
This
sustainable culture. It runs itself.
sounds like it's somebody. It sounds like a Cinderella story. Somebody who's getting ready to go on a run in March.
Sounds like we need to figure out who that is and ride them in our bracket.
I hear it. Wow, this has been cool, man. I appreciate it. Anytime I get a wise coach and a friend on the podcast, I just want to share. I want to scream from the rooftops about leadership. I want to talk about relationships. I want to talk about planning and accountability and organizational structure. And there's no better man than I know to talk about it than you. So, as we wrap up, we like to talk about what does winning at the game of life look like. We talked about the fundamentals. We talked about the behind the scenes, falling in love with the practice. Coach, what does winning at the game of life look like for you?
Winning, right? I mean, there's literal wins. For me, winning at the game of life, obviously, it involves winning literal basketball games. There's a win and a loss column, like that's what we're judged off of. But there's also wins that are daily wins. And for me, that can be something as small as I've got some you know additional fundamentals of my family, my friends, my health, growth, like you mentioned, and just passion. Right. Well, a win for me is spending time with my family. My wife and I are really fortunate. We just welcomed our baby girl to our family. We've got a 1 month old at home, Gianna. So you talk about surviving in advance, and we got 202 at the house. So
That's every
trust me,
day.
hey, just sleep is at a premium that I cannot afford at my house. But just surviving every day, that's a win, right? Like we got through today, and that's a win, right? Like that's a small win. Our children being healthy, our children, growing and starting to hit milestones, right? Like my son eating, feeding himself, starting to talk, starting to say words. Um, you know, Selfishly, I watch him stand in front of his little Tykes goal and shoot baskets, and he's getting pretty good at it. He's a way better shooter than I'll ever be already at the tender age. But just seeing him, grow, be healthy, seeing him be around, our group at Indiana Tech has been a win for me because every athlete selfishly you want your kids to be involved and to be in love with the same things that you are. And a lot of people ask me like how I'm managing that, and I'm really not doing anything. And that's a win for me. Just to tie it back, like he's around the game of basketball every day, so that's just what he knows. Like he dribbles his basketball, like, or tries to dribble, when he's shooting at his goal, and he sees our guys doing that. And like when at our games, when it comes to the games, when we make a three, like there's guys that, the bench mob, we call it, right? Like they're screaming boom, right? When we make threes. Well, now there's an NBA commercial coming on, and Kevin Durant makes a three, and my son's yelling boom. Like
That's
that's a
awesome.
win. Like my kid organically is falling in love with the game of basketball. But those wins are deep with family. Like building this family that my wife and I are currently in the storm of, with 2 under 2, like that to me is a win. Having the success at Indiana Tech, both on and off the court, like one of the biggest wins that I've had, um, not the national runner up that we had a year ago, was after that. After the season ended that summer, one of our players got married, and our entire team was there. We were there as coaches. We were in a relaxed environment. It's not game planning, it's not serious, but to see that side of these young individuals, like that's a brotherhood that they built. And to watch your players who were struggling to make it through a sprint 3 years ago, now become a man, become a husband, soon to become a father. Another one of our players, he welcomed his daughter recently as well, and he's a father. He's sending me pictures of his daughter, and I have a daughter now, so I'm reaching out to him. Like, how was it, right? Like, because that's a side of fatherhood that I hadn't been in, that my player was in. So like that's a win for me, to watch those guys grow into fathers, husbands, productive citizens, in society. When they reach out to me and say, "Hey, coach, I applied for this job," you might get a call, or, "Hey, coach, do you know somebody at this company I'm trying to get a job at?" Like those to me ultimately are way more valuable than the wins and losses. Um, but the last thing I'll say about winning is, I'm sure you've heard it before. Like we all eat when we win, right? And so my individual success and the guy next to me individual success contributes to our success as a collective group, right? So I don't want to just win individually. I want to win, and I want to bring this guy with me, right? Whatever win I get, whether it's a job or a promotion or whatever the case may be, I want to figure out how within my success now I can impact others. I talked about a game plan. One of the most rewarding things about what I do, and the main reason I got into college basketball, was because I love basketball. It's my passion. But I love people. I love relationships. Well, one of the coolest things, you talk about real estate agents all over the country, and how you guys can connect. Well, I love that I can call one of my best friends in Alabama, and he says, "Hey, I'm trying to get this player," or, "Hey, I'm trying to get this job." And I can say, "Well, hey, I know this coach at that school," or, "I know, that player's trainer. Like, let me connect you guys." And when I connect them, and ultimately it comes to fruition, like that to me is a win. It's rewarding because you brought somebody else along with you, and you contributed to somebody else winning. And you don't want the notoriety of it. You just want to know that, hey, I had a hand in bridging bridging the gap here, and leading somebody else to ultimately having success. And if I'm leading a group of people ultimately to wins, and I'm connecting people to wins, like that's a win. Ask my wife. That's a saying in our house. Like, "Hey, I Gianna slept 4 straight hours last night." That's a win,
That's a
man. Like,
win.
that's a win.
That's a
Luca
win.
got home Luca got home from school, he took his shoes off on his own and put them up. Like, that's a win. Like, I'm obsessed with finding wins. I love being able to say that's a win. Whether it means, hey, we just won a conference game, or it was something as simple as something with my wife, or my children. So winning, finding wins, man, that's what I love to do. And if you've got that mindset, then you'll start to find out, you'll find a lot more wins if that's where your mindset is, as opposed to just this one big win. Like, let's find multiple wins, and eventually that's going to lead to the big win.
Absolutely. No, I love that. It's what it's all about. It's what it's all about. Relationships win. And you can see how that's laced through your entire life. So, as we wrap up here, these kids say give this man his flowers. Who's somebody that you want to send some virtual flowers to today? Who's a relationship? You talk about all these relationships in your life. Who's a relationship that has helped you get to where you are today?
Man, there's so many of them, really. There seriously is. Uh, I can go as recent as, I mean, look where we are right now. I'm sitting on a podcast with you. Like, not only have you been involved in our family by helping us find a home, and ultimately helping us build a family, but just the relationship that I could call for a mentorship from you, or I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be on this podcast. Like, I mean, I want to give you your flowers. I want to give my current boss his flowers for the impact that he's done. Ted Albert, you know bringing me here a few years ago, and ultimately building to what we got in right now. I mean, I've got my personal close friends that I'd love to give their flowers to, because look, in basketball, you played, you're a coach's kid. Like, you don't always get to be the most present in your family and in your relationships life, and I don't get to this point without some of those friends that I've had, that I can pick up the phone when I'm on a recruiting call, or I'm on a recruiting trip. I'm driving 8 hours by myself. Like, I don't get through those without those. Obviously my parents, like, I want to give them their flowers for I'm now a father of two. So, I don't get here without their guidance. I don't get here without their love and their constant support. So, I mean, I could be a florist at this point if you want me to give up. I got flowers for everybody, man. Like, I love it, because uh, everybody has a story, and everybody, like I mentioned, has something to be grateful for, but everybody's got relationships that you can trace something back to, and whether that be a single job or a single accomplishment. Like, I've got a lot of them, and I'm really fortunate to have so many good people in my life that have helped me get to this. And so, um, I appreciate everybody along the way, and I got a long list of flowers that we could record a whole nother episode on, that I'd like to give out. But those that are involved in my life, like, they know that I've given them flowers, and I'm happy about that. And I love being grateful, and I love appreciation, and wouldn't be here without so many of those people, and yourself included in that.
I received that. I appreciate it. It sounds like Grandma was a instrumental part of your life, especially around March Madness. I hope you enjoy March Madness with your kids the way she shared that. And um, I gotta spill the tea though, real quick. Relationships do win. I've been grateful that you and I built this relationship over time, but um, is the story true that Ashley maybe wanted to use a different realtor when you guys were moving, and you had to come in and you had to say, you know what, I'm gonna win this one. You can win 99, but I got this one. And
And that is that is
is that
that's
a
a
true
true
story?
story. That's a true story. I don't win very many battles, and you talk about flowers. Like, man, let me give a whole store of flowers to that woman, my wife, because she's stood by my side through it all. I don't know how or why, but she hitched her wagon to this crazy dream. She moved to Jonesboro, Arkansas with me, um, to chase this crazy dream that I had. And I don't know how I tricked her into marrying me, but I did. She hasn't come to her senses yet, and realizes that I way outkicked my coverage. So let
That's
me
a
let me
win.
give that whole oh man, talk about win. That's monumental. But yeah, that was funny. I had never purchased a home. I had never used a realtor before, and she our first home was a condo that she had bought before we had met. And she when we were in the market for a house, that's who she wanted to go with. And I was like, look, and even my father-in-law, like, my father-in-law is a phenomenal relationship guy. Like, he's the best. He does a ton of, like, meetings, like WebEx and things like that, and does his leadership story, which is fantastic. But even him, he was like, well, this relationship was so good, this realtor. And I was like, yo, no way. Like, there is only one person in this conversation. This is a one horse race, and I'll stand here, cross my arms. I'm digging in. I'm not going anywhere. Like, we're using the Null team, and it's just so funny. Like, relationships win. Well, talk about it now, come full circle all these years later, like, we can't wait, to come in to interaction with somebody that's looking for a home, because it's like, "Man, do I got somebody for you, like, let me tell you about this person." "Well, I got some." I know, trust me. She
Nope,
has somebody too,
I'm locked
but
in.
I got somebody. So,
Well,
hey,
and not to
that's a win.
that's a win, and not to the we'll turn the conversation around here. To this day, Ashley's become one of our biggest fans, and we are grateful. So I'm gonna send some flowers to Ashley. You sent them to her. I'm gonna send some to her as well. So if she's listening right now, which I don't know why she would listen to us on a podcast, but I appreciate the introductions that she's been given, and that's why we do what we do, man. That's why we do what we do is to be different. We want to help people save time, reduce stress, and help them keep as much money in their pocket as possible. But we come with the house. We tell people we come with the house. We're included. We're not going to leave you. We want to keep building a relationship, and that's what we do. So, no, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for sharing today. Survive and advance is our theme. We're into March Madness. If you're feeling like you're lonely, if you feel like you're just trying to survive, you want to thrive. You deserve to thrive. You're going to take some knocks. But what I heard today is get around people that lift you up. Have a plan A, plan B, plan C, and just go get it. Kenton, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your friendship. Thanks for being on today.
Thanks so much for having me, Brad.
All right. That's a wrap. Relationships win. You heard it here from Coach. See ya.